Good day, everybody. It's April the April the 9th, and the year is 2022. I'm trying to just touch on on a subject that caught my attention. Again, it's with regards to what's happening in the world right now. Yes, Russia has been sanctioned, but the funny thing about this sanction is, as I understand, the sanctions on everything except Russian oil, because Europe is largely depending on Russian oil. Uh, it's a much better quality oil, like I mentioned in my other videos. It's what you call it's the natural gas and oil, like the one you can buy from Iran. It's not crude oil or petroleum based oil. It just This is natural gas and oil. What's the difference? Because it doesn't the petroleum oil or the crude oil, or the kind that America just can process or can refine in their oil, the oil reserves in different states, especially in Alaska and so on. It emits carbon dioxide, pollutes the environment and the atmosphere, causing contributing to global warming. But the natural gas and oil, no, it's ethane, methane, said to be not. It's said to be more uh, environmentally friendly, uh, and that said. So that's most countries prefer to buy the Russian oil, and it's that was the whole drama about the Nord Stream 1 and 2, and why US wanted to, and with the European countries wanted to halt the Nord Stream 2 becoming operational. The project is complete, and it was, and the US put every possible obstacle to prevent the operation of Nord Stream 2. But it's looks like the saying goes, US is a superpower. US is the biggest economy in the world. It's Russia is The Russian population is like 144 million. Russian Federation. Before, when it was USSR or Soviet Union with 15 countries, I think the entire population of that region was Soviet Union was 288 million, I believe. So it's almost dwindled to half that population. When population becomes the population is also contributes in a sense to the consumer power. A bigger population, like in India, 1.3 billion. It's a huge consumer power. That's why all the corporations from the Western countries want to move to India, even if they are selling a candy for 5 cents. 1.3 billion. Even if 10% of 1.3 billion purchase a candy, that's a big revenue right there. So China has the same consumer power, huge. So there is, and countries like Canada, uh, big economy, but they don't have a consumer power. And the popular for a huge country like Canada, they don't. The population is so relatively so small. It's about 35 million, and US is kind of balanced in that sense. It's a bigger population, 325 million, and also the GDP of US is said to be 21 times greater than Russia's. That's Russia is, if I'm not mistaken, the GDP of US is 21.7 trillion thereabouts, and Russian is 1.8 trillion ballpark. So you can see uh, how how in terms of the financial cloud, US is so much stronger. They can war costs money. If they go to war, they can instigate every other country with money. That's what they do. uh, and every country around the world look up to US because it's financial power, right? And so US can exert a lot of influence around the world with its money. So Russia, as much as we understand Russia is a greater, it has more nuclear warheads. Uh, by contrast, more than the U.S. military is 3 times bigger, as we understand, but it's the military. When it comes to Russian military comes is just barely 1/3 of U.S. military, but Russia has more nuclear drones and nuclear warheads. So that's the, how could you say, that's Russia's trump card, so to speak. And and push comes to shove, US is will will have to think 100 times before getting into something foolish and destroying the world. So it's the same game with North Korea, such as it's a small country. I guess it's probably, from the look of it, subject to correction. It's probably the size of Florida, uh, and probably not even. And But they are they are like recently, North Korea for a long time they were lying low, try to be low keyed, and recently when Biden wanted to buy oil from, uh, I guess when Biden tried to, I think the U.S. was criticized by the by all quarters, how they are instigating this war. They uh, It's a proxy war. It's And the sacrificial lamb is Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and the Ukrainian leaders make money. They are all cahoots with the U.S. government, and they will comfortably get out of it with lots of money. When I say money, I'm talking about huge amounts of money, but the people pay for it by way of sacrificing their lives, their children's, their infants, their babies, their family members, and the infrastructure is ruined and their homes are gone. But Ukrainian leaders laughing all the way to banks, and they are called the patriots. Like I said, there is in my other video, what's the difference between a patriot and a terrorist? It's one and the same. Well, so what makes the difference? The only difference is who is ruling at the time. That said, a good example is Bin Laden. Uh, Bin Laden was the most notorious, the most wanted terrorist by U.S. But back in 1979, it was Ronald Reagan, the president of the United States, when Russia attacked. Uh, I guess when 1979 Russia invaded Ukraine. I'm sorry, Russia invaded Afghanistan, and Bin Laden, the world's notorious terrorist leader, was fighting Russia. When Bin Laden, the terrorist, the time he was fighting Russia, he was the freedom fighter, and he was US wanted to help. Ronald Reagan invited the Bin Laden's group. Bin Laden, there is no. I didn't see Bin Laden coming to the White House, but it's his deputies and his delegates. the so-called Mujahideen, that's the group they belong to, fighting Russia at the time. This is back in the early 80s, in 1979. Russia invaded Afghanistan, and so, anyways, the Russia stayed there 10 years and finally withdrew because they didn't have the financial power to stay there. US stayed 20 years because it's a bigger financial power. You need money, and without money, nothing happens. Anyway, the point I'm trying to illustrate here is President Ronald Reagan invited the Mujahideen group, the Bin Laden's group, and gave them everything they need to fight Russians. Call them heroes and what do you call freedom fighters and patriots and every book in the name. But the same Bin Laden's group, 4 years later, not 4 years later, was it in, let's say this happened in the early 80s. Okay, 2 decades later, right? And right, not quite uh, isn't it 2001? So it's a decade later, right? Uh, what happened? He attacked, he turned against America. 9/11, the infamous 9/11 and Twin Tower. And now, America's favorite freedom fighter, or the patriot who is trying to save his country against the Russian villains, suddenly became the worst terrorist in the world. US wanted his head, right? Probably on a stick. So do you? I'm just using an expression, and so this is how a terrorist. See, politics is there is nothing noble about politicians. They quote all the noble things. They come to power, and the world power, the world ruling imperial powers. It's all about money and greed and nothing. Who cares for their priority is money, financial coffers, and how do they do that? The more countries they can annex, their financial coffer grows bigger and bigger. Why do you think China wants to annex Taiwan? Just to help the Taiwanese people? Why does China want Hong Kong? Because they love the people of Hong Kong? No. The more they can annex, bigger their financial coffer becomes. So that's the way it goes. But US plays a dirty game differently. They want puppet regimes. US is rich enough, the richest economy, but they want their hegemony uh, consolidated, kept intact, and no threat to their hegemony. It's their no nothing not nothing becomes a threat to their imperial power. But they talk about democracy extensively. They want puppets. Like, what is NATO? NATO is like, when they after the World War, it was just 12 countries, and now 30 countries. Now that's why this one of the reason one of the reasons for Putin to uh, invade Ukraine. All these countries, US, they are all vassal states, uh, puppets in the alliance. It's the US that has the say, the leader, gang leader. And who is the bosom buddy of United States? It's the Great Britain, where the sun never sets in the horizon, right? And so this is how evil the system is. Evil is probably the right word, but this evil political uh, powers pointing finger at others and saying they are evil. If they call Russian leader Putin every book in the name, he's a warmonger, he's what is it? He's a war criminal. How many? If Putin is how many times like How many countries the US interfered with, and regime change, right? How many million people died every time they went and made a mess of another country because the leader was uh, not in how do you say that, doesn't leader is not doesn't want to be subservient to the US imperial power, does not go along with the US power. US CIA, every dirty game, remove the leader using their own people sometimes, coup d'etat, and set up all kinds of coups in that country and killing people. You see that. And who is that, the political analyst? I In a moment I'll tell you. It was Noam Chomsky, a very erudite elderly gentleman, scholar, political analyst, who said every US president, post World War II presidents in US, have committed, every president has committed, every president post World War II committed indictable offenses, right? Listen to this. Every post World War II president in United States has committed indictable offenses. Let's see. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Okay.
In the next few months, it seems that about people were killed, and then he goes off to the next topic. That's the first few months. Went on to probably hundreds of thousands. Formally, the U.S. Announced a boycott of weapons, but secretly increased the supply of weapons, including counterinsurgency equipment, so that the Indonesians could consummate the invasion. That's just a short period in office, but that's indictable. Seriously, in fact, that's a major war crime. Carter increased, as the Indonesian atrocities were increasing. They peaked in 1978. Carter's flow of weapons to Indonesia increased when Congress imposed human rights restrictions. By then there was a human rights movement in Congress to block the flow of advanced weaponry to Indonesia. Carter arranged through Mondale, vice president, to get Israel to send U.S. Skyhawks to Indonesia to enable Indonesia to complete what turned out to be near genocide, killing maybe a quarter of the population or something. In the Middle East, Carter just won the Nobel Prize. His great achievement was the Camp David Agreements. The Camp David Agreements are presented as a diplomatic triumph for the United States. In fact, they were a diplomatic catastrophe. At Camp David, the United States and Israel accepted, finally, Egypt's 1971 offer, which they had then, U.S. had rejected at the time, except that now it was worse from the U.S.-Israeli point of view because it included the Palestinians. In order to get Israel to accept Egypt's 1971 offer after a major war and atrocities and so on, Carter raised aid, military and other aid to Israel to more than 50% of total aid worldwide. Israel used it at once in exactly the way they said they were going to do, as every sane person knew, as an opportunity to attack their northern neighbor, first in 1978, then in 1982, and to increase integration of the occupied territories. And that's for starters. We can continue.
Reagan?
I don't think we have to talk about that one either. I mean, Reagan is the first president to have been condemned by the International Court of Justice for what they called the unlawful use of force, meaning international terrorism, in the war against Nicaragua. Again, that's just for starters. They also, the Security Council, endorsed it in 2 resolutions, both of which were vetoed by the United States.
Bush won.
Well, we can begin with the invasion of Panama. The invasion of Panama, which, according to the Panamanians, killed about 3,000 people, since it's never investigated. We don't know if that's true or not. This was done in order to kidnap a disobedient thug who had been supported by the United States right through his worst atrocities. Noriega, who was brought to Florida and tried for crimes that he committed mostly on the CIA payroll. Okay, that's aggression. We could go into the details of the war in Iraq, but there were plainly opportunities for, they might not have worked, we don't know, but there were opportunities for diplomatic settlement, which the Bush administration refused to consider. And incidentally, the press would not report, with a single exception, and Long Island Newsday, which did report the whole story throughout accurately, and is the only newspaper in the country to have done so. The Bush administration then did attack, and the attack was carried out in a manner which is criminal under the laws of war. They attacked infrastructure. I mean, if you attack New York City and you destroy the electrical system, the power system, the sewage systems, and so on, that amounts to biological warfare, and that's the nature of the attack. Then came a sanctions regime, which it's mostly Clinton, but began with Bush, which is, by conservative estimates, killed hundreds of thousands of people while strengthening Saddam Hussein. That takes us off to Clinton, which, that's the beginning. That's by no means the end. We can run through it. Well, we can run through that one case suffices.
All right.
But there are plenty of others.
Bush too?
Let's go on with Clinton.
Okay.
And one of Clinton's minor escapades, very minor, was sending a couple of cruise missiles to the Sudan to destroy what they knew to be a pharmaceutical plant. There was no intelligence failure. According to the only estimates we have from the German ambassador and the regional director of Near East Foundation, who does field work in Sudan, both of them estimate several tens of thousands of deaths from one cruise missile attack. It's pretty serious. If somebody did that to us, we'd regard it as bad news. And again, we can continue. In the Middle East, for example, Clinton began by declaring past UN resolutions, in the words of his administration, obsolete and anachronistic. Okay, so we're finished with that. No more international law. Then comes a period called a peace process, except that during the peace process, Israeli settlement, which means settlement paid for by the U.S. taxpayer and supported by U.S. military aid and diplomacy, continually increased. The most extreme year was Clinton.
Folks, I just paused it. Noam Chomsky. Look him up on YouTube and Google him. And very interesting individual, scholar, very erudite person, and insightful person if you want to understand. And he talks about all the US presidents who have committed indictable offenses in international affairs and interfering with other countries, and he goes into details, and he has much more to say about the other presidents too. It all started after the Second World War in the last 70 years. That's when the US became imperial power. US made unbelievable amount of money with the selling US petroleum gas to the countries involved in the war, and at the time Saudi Arabia wasn't producing oil, and Saudi Arabia was dead broke because Mecca was, due to the war that lasted I think 7 years, Second World War, the pilgrims, they make every year. I think a little over a billion people go on pilgrimage, and they go to Mecca, and that's huge, phenomenal revenue for Saudi Arabia. The US got involved with Saudi Arabia. That was the Middle East beginning of the advent of the OPEC and all that thing that later resulted in USSR, Soviet Union, becoming broke, and uh, early 70s the oil prices were manipulated, and Soviet, it affected US, it affected Soviet Union, and finally in the 1908 in the early 80s, Soviet Union economy was totally stagnant, and bad leaders as well in Soviet Union. Finally, in 1991, Gorbachev decided to go with Ronald Reagan and considered to dissolve Soviet Union. You, Ronald Reagan was a big player in Soviet Union disintegrating. So uh, since Gorbachev's time, Gorbachev, of course, he may be a good man, but and he was selfless in his own way. He was the leader of imperial power, which was totally in doldrums. What would you expect? And he caved in to the U.S. Hegemony, and the subsequent leaders after Gorbachev, they were not very insightful people. In they were just not individuals with foresight and vision, and even love for their country. They just were there to get their own scoop on into in the na- in the government's coffer that's going bankrupt, and they got away. And Putin got in, things changed. Putin holds all this. I don't. We cannot get into his mind. I don't know, but we judge people by their actions. So Gorbachev US promised that NATO will not move eastward, but US did not keep their promise when Gorbachev raised this. And today US is denying everything. There is transcript in Malta summit when this happened. Uh, George H.W. Bush was the one who was representing the United States, because Ronald Reagan stayed behind. The president sent the vice president at the time. And there are transcripts, there are every form of minutes and information that US is outrightly trying to deny. So that's what happened. Apart from all these reasons, Putin doesn't want to let go of Ukraine. And why? Ukraine holds immense potential, like Russia. They have shale gas too, but they don't have the money to exploit it. And Putin doesn't. And the Zelensky, the leader, wants to sell the country to United States. There is a saying: "I have nothing against United States. I have nothing against Russia. I have nothing against any country for Ukraine." I feel very bad about Ukraine because the victims are innocent people, families, children, infants, even babies. All right, so these innocent people, because their passions, their emotions are evoked and instigated. They think they are being patriotic, and they want to give their life. Their lives are being sacrificed in the altar for the leaders to make money. And if only people recognize their leaders and the world leaders, the caliber of these leaders we elect, it's horrible. It's horrible. There is not an iota of ethics in what's going on. Everybody is in it for money. and people are being dumb and ignorant and stupid, and they don't recognize these leaders who are jackals. uh, Frederick Forsyth wrote a novel, Day of the Jackal, and it was very famous novel in the 70s. Hollywood made two movies. In fact, Charles de Gaulle was the first person to defy the petrodollar, the French president, long before Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. We'll talk about it in the other next video that I'm thinking of posting. Thank you. This is long enough, way too long. So please, I hope you won't find it a turn off. Thank you. Bye now.